The plot revolves around a boy born into a Runkendel family that has been recognized as a family of illustrious swordsmen and rules half of the world. And in this half the power rules, where the strongest belittle the weakest. In their clan, the strongest swordsmen with outstanding strength and talent were born. The family was not distinguished by love for their neighbors. Brothers and sisters are fighting a cold war for the place of the head of the family and inheritance. The family has a hierarchy. The oldest are the strongest and bravest, and the younger the child, the weaker they are considered. In total there are 13 children in the family, and the youngest of them is the main character named Jean Runkendel. After reaching the age of 1, each child of the Runkendel family must go through a selection ritual. The ritual was a clearing with swords stuck in the ground where the child was released. He had to choose any of the swords in front of him, and depending on his choice, his personality and life path were determined. The glade with swords has the name Garden of Swords. It was formed by sticking their swords into the ground by members of the Runkendel family who went down in the history of the family with particular success. The garden symbolizes all the dreams in honor of the family. After the selection ritual, the child is sent to live in Gromovoylok until the child reaches the age of 10, together with their nanny, who is assigned to each child. The nanas of the Runkendel clan were required to have the 7th rank of martial arts. At Thunder Castle, a child is taught sword skills and martial arts. At the age of 10, the child is sent back to live in the Runkendel estate and continue to study further, increasing his swordsmanship rank. The 1st rank is almost 0 experience. 2nd rank, skills of a 14-year-old novice cadet. The 3rd rank is the skills of a 16-year-old cadet. 4th rank, martial artists. Further, with the increase in the mastery of arts, the rank increases. The story begins with the ritual of selecting a genie. By absolute chance, he chooses the family sword Belisada, which once belonged to the first head of the Temur family. The older Jin got, the more obvious it became that he didn't have the talent for swordsmanship that his family did. He turned out to be the worst swordsman in the family. Because of this, his brothers, sisters, and parents did not reach out to him, which greatly affected his character. Jin was bullied by his twin brothers, Daytona and Hitona Runkendel, who were 2 years older than him, and the rest of the family did not approach the boy. Jin believed that if he practiced swordsmanship hard every day, he would eventually be able to get even a little closer to his family's skill, but all of his training was useless and all of reading the huge theory didn't help. For every useless training Jin did, his brothers bullied him by breaking his training wooden sword and ripping up the theory books, but Jin continued his training hoping for progress in his swordsmanship every day. So passed Jin's long teenage years and part of his youth until the age of 25, after which he was exiled from the Runkendel family, but unbeknownst to him, he continued to be watched by the knights of the family. Now he had nothing to do with his family except his last name, wandering aimlessly around the city every day and looking at the happy faces of people passing by. He met a master who taught him how to use magic. Having magical abilities was strictly forbidden in the Runkendel family, which was probably why Jin couldn't find this talent of subduing magic power in himself. It's been 3 years since Jin was exiled and studied magic, and on one of the evenings of the magic reception training, Jin was illuminated by a dark aura and a god or shadow master appeared to him. After his sudden appearance, Fred discovers that Jin is under the Blade Illusion curse which suppresses the sword skill and offers Jin a contract in which he creates immunity to curses and grants him the power of Shadow Kai. Soldred mentions that it's probably because of the curse and his Runkendel blood as a swordsman family that he was so drawn to Jin. After the soldier makes Jin an unprecedented magician and promises to watch him, then disappears. Jin, realizing that the curse has been lifted, takes up his sword and runs outside to experience the skill that has been locked up all these years. He abruptly raises the sword above his head and begins to feel that he can't feel the weight of the sword and he's not moving. It's like it's an extension of his hand. With joy and self-confidence, he swings his sword, performing various elements, later adding magic to it all and feeling his destructive power. As he revels in his power, the knights of his family watch him from above on a cliff, and after a while, they blow up his house and rubble of the house falls on Jin. The Jin is buried under rocks and dies. The bright light of the sun shines on Jin and here he is again going through the selection ritual and he again has to choose the family sword. Jin does not realize what is happening, but later realizes that he was reborn to live this life again, but without the curse and with the power of Shadow Kai. All of his memories from his previous life were preserved. And this time, he chose the family sword on purpose. Jin is sent to Thunder Castle to live with his older twin brothers, who have been there for 2 years. The details of his life in Thunder Castle are not specified. But after 6 years of his stay there, his brothers continued to mock him and one day the brothers wanted to play a joke on his brother and scare him with a dead bird, which they themselves caught and killed. Instead of Jin, the bird was found by a maid, which greatly frightened her. Jin, looking at the bird, recalled that his brothers would grow up to be bloodthirsty warriors without compassion, which he had seen in his previous life. The brothers laughed at the maid and harassed her with insults Gina, to which he decided not to tolerate their words and antics anymore and used his Shadow Kai power to beat them up so much that they wouldn't bother him anymore. After the fight, Master Kang, who was the guardian knight of the Runkendel children, appears in the room and notices the remnants of the shadow aura on Jin's hands. Jin told Master Kang not to take his brothers to the doctor, but to carry them to lie under a tree in Thunder Castle Alley in a storm, next to the grave of the bird they had killed earlier as a prank. Thus, he believed that he would make them answer for their actions towards an innocent bird. Night King couldn't understand what he saw on Jin's hands. It didn't look like an aura, so he mistook it for magic that was strictly forbidden in the Runkendel family. Kang decides to report this to Jin's father, part-time family head Shiren Rukendel, and goes to the Runkendel estate on the same day. Jin had an idea why Kang had left Thunder Castle and watched him go, waiting for him to return, assuming that his father would also be there. Night King reported all the details to Jin's father and was ordered to call all the commanders together. There are 7 commanders in the family and all are Jin's siblings. The eldest Moon Runkendel is the first commander. Next, we meet Depues Runkendel, who is the 4th commander, and finally Mary Runkendel, the 7th commander, the youngest of the commanders. The rest will be revealed later. All the commanders and 200 knights are gathered. The commanders are discussing why the head could gather them, but all their guesses were not even close to the truth. Shiren announced that all the commanders and he are going to Thunder Castle. Upon arriving at the castle, he gathers Daytona and Heighten to find out their version of the fight. The sons claim that Jin attacked them for no reason and used magic to defeat them. Shiren asks them not to tell anyone about this and asks them to invite Jin. Jin identifies the reason for the fight as revenge, and the father asks everyone to come out except Jin. Jin shows his father his abilities, and Shiren immediately determines it's like a gift from the god Soldred, a power that only the first head of the Lord Temer family had, which means that Jin is truly special and will have the same fate as the first descendant of the Runkendel family. As it turned out, Soldred appeared under Temer and protected the family, but after Temer's death, he disappeared and never appeared again. Jin told his father that he was going to use this power for the good of the family, but Shiren recognized this blatant lie, so Jin admitted that he would only use it to his advantage. His father promised that Jin would now be under his strict supervision and left Thunder Castle with everyone else. Before leaving, Jin's sister Mary came up to him and gave him a phoenix heart as a parting gift, telling him to boil it and eat it. Eating such a delicacy leads to immunity against fire. Nanny Gilly made phoenix heart soup for lunch. The Tone brothers looked at the soup with great appetite and really wanted it for lunch too. Jin made a deal with them that if they dug a tunnel where he told them to, he would share the soup with them. The brothers had no doubt set out to dig, and after hitting the stone wall, they returned to the castle. Jin had left them 2 teaspoons of soup as promised, and the brothers weren't happy about it, but it couldn't be helped. Meanwhile, Jin went into the tunnel and reached the wall using the magic he had been trained in for the last 3 years of his lives. The wall collapsed and Jin found himself facing a huge door to the Runkendel family's secret library. In his previous life, Jin often listened to the brothers' conversations and once heard them discussing a special phrase for opening this door. Runkendel's child has come to comfort Murekin after saying these words. The door swung open and Jin found himself in front of the library where he had dreamed of going in his previous life. Walking along the corridor, he came to a huge capsule where a man with scales on his face was imprisoned. Jin realized that this was a prisoner of Murekin, the dragon who had been defeated by the first head of the family and imprisoned for eternal sleep in the Runkendel library. Jin ignored him and went to the archives of tomes from the clans that the Runkendel family had once exterminated, assuming that they might find out about his trips to the library. He did not dare to take books, but began to copy out the information he needed and take it with him. For several days he visited the library, and on one of the regular trips he heard the sound of the door opening and could not believe that someone from Thunder Castle could come to the library. Jin moved closer to the door and saw Murekin waking up from a deep sleep. Murekin looked intimidating and clearly displeased with the presence of anyone in the library. Jin pretended to be an innocent child who accidentally wandered into the library. Murekin smelled a spiritual smell that only those who had made a contract with God could have. Jin revealed his shadow power and Murekin was saddened by that. The fact that it is a small child is the one that Murekin is required to serve under the contract with the soldier. Murekin introduced himself as Alfred's friend, confidant, and last descendant of the original Shadows. Murekin appeared before Jin in his dragon form. Murekin's life took place on the peak of Murekin, so the mountain where Thunder Castle is located was named. Murekin was a powerful being and ruled the land around the mountain. But 1,000 years ago, in a battle with the first head of Runkendel, he was defeated and gave up his land and fell into a deep sleep for many centuries. Murekin himself said that he did not remember why there was a battle between him and Temer. Every person who makes a contract with a god has their own accompanying guardian dragon. But nothing has been known about Soldred's dragon all this time. Murakin was not an enemy of Runkandel, on the contrary. He was called the guardian of the family. Now Jin also has his own personal guardian dragon. It's very likely that Jin's discovery of the library and introduction to Murakin wasn't an accident. Jin decides to get to know Murakin better, but it will still be useful in general future missions. In their conversation, Murakin praises Jin for his efforts in studying books from the library and compared to Temur at his age. Jin is a head taller, but Temur didn't need to study theory, he was already fighting well without it. Murakin understands that Jin, as a small child, strives to become the same as Temur, and maybe even surpass him, so Murakin does not give Jin high hopes for doing this, but encourages him to continue learning sword fighting. Murakin told Jin that the nickname Soldreda is limitless, which means that the power that Jin can reach is also limitless. Jin learns a new skill of his shadow power, Soul Release, which Murakin taught him. Before teaching Jin a new skill, Murakin made the false assumption that Jin couldn't perform mana release and transfer. Mana has a twofold nature. Simply put, mana is an excess of supernatural power in the magician, which is collected in his hands and is used to create spells and other purposes. Jin showed Murakin the skills he had learned in his previous life, which shocked him, but he agreed to teach him Spirit Release. Spirit Release is the creation of shadows. All shadows in the world appear at the will of Soldred, and if Jin is his chosen one, then he can also control shadows. Half a year after Jin and Murakin met, Tong's brothers turned 10 years old and left Thunder Castle, and Jin turned 9, which meant that in just 1 year, he would also be leaving Thunder Castle, but for now, he would have to celebrate his birthday. Nanny Gilly made a strawberry cake, which she thought Jin adored, but in fact Murakin adored strawberry cakes and Jin always gave them to him when they met in the library. On this day, Kang reported on a guest who had come to wish Jin a happy birthday. Lunar Runkandel came to Thunder Castle. The moon was the largest, the eldest of the 13 children of the Runkandel family. She was the first commander and a rank 9 knight, the strongest of her siblings. Luna has given up her position as head of the family, has no desire to participate in family wars over the division of inheritance, and has been compared to a lone white whale who is always and everywhere alone. Jin was shocked by his sister's unannounced appearance and worried about the purpose of her visit, but Luna was offended because they only came to congratulate him on his birthday and warn him that when he returns home, he will be dragged into a family showdown and he will become a participant in the inheritance war. And then Jin asked himself the logical question of why she hadn't told him that in her previous life, if she hadn't seen him as a rival back then. Jin revealed that there was a complete assassination attempt on him when the Blade Illusion curse was cast on him, because someone also cast this curse on him as a child. Luna showed all her love for Jin in their private conversation and promised to always protect him, after which she handed him her gift. The gift was a pendant that had once belonged to the Orgel Beast King, and countless people had fought for it, but no one had been able to get it back, and I couldn't survive and get it. The pendant creates resistance to magic attacks below rank 5 and has the function of summoning if it is broken. Luna gave Jin a guarantee that if he gets into a hopeless situation, then he must break the pendant, and she will immediately help him. After spending time with Jin and Luna, she eventually left and Jin went to the library with a cake. Murakin immediately noticed his pendant and told him its story, but then he noticed that this gift was given to him by a person with a strong aura, which he could feel from the library. Jin was terrified that Luna could also sense Murakin's aura and could tell his father everything, but Murakin calmed him down, because Luna showed her boundless love with such a priceless gift, and therefore would not inform on her beloved younger brother. Another year passed and Jin was already 10 years old. Jin himself thought that all the time he would spend there would not make sense, but it turned out that he was wrong. Over the years, he has received his father's recognition, a phoenix heart as a gift from Sister Mary, the trust and protection of his older sister, and a meeting with the dragon Murakin. Jin diligently prepared his combat training before leaving Thunder Castle, visited Murakin and made sure that he would follow him as unobtrusively as possible and that he would take care of his copy and the flask that he left behind in the library. While Murakin assured Jin that everything would be fine he casually wishes Jin to become a swordsman mage like Temur, and Jin remembers what Fred told him in his previous life. In the beginning, the Runkendel clan was a clan of sword mages, and Temur was the strongest in the world. Murakin told Jin why Runkendel had gone from being a swordsman to just a swordsman. The fact is that Runkendel had to reject magic because of a pact made 1,000 years ago with the Zapel mage clan. Jin thanked Murakin for his story and loyalty, and then gave him 2 pieces of cake and the stolen wine before Nanny Gilly saw him. Now it was time for Jin to leave Thunder Castle. Nanny Gilly warned Jin that he would have to work even harder at home than here, so he should be mentally prepared for this. He imagined the knights who would accompany his carriage. And so on October 30th, 1790, the carriage drove away from Thunder Castle towards the teleportation gate. The longer and further the carriage traveled, the more the storm intensified and the snow became more numerous. Nanny Gilly decides to stop in the nearest village and wait out the storm there. They do not have time to reach the village, and they are attacked by a clan of magicians from Middle, and the Black King's mercenaries accompanying the knights are instructed to stay in the carriage. But Jin immediately realizes that the knights are not protecting them and are traitors or figureheads. According to the rules that every knight of the Runkendel clan knows, at least one knight must always be with the child. If they are attacked, in the case of Jin, both knights have left to fight the attackers. Jin shares his observations with Nanny Gilly, and she, realizing that she did not see traitors in the knights even before leaving, is now forced to protect little Jin on her own. They jump out of the carriage and run as far as possible from the scene of the skirmish in the forest. It was suspiciously quiet in the woods, and for some reason the attackers didn't go after Nanny Gilly and Jean, which makes them watch out. Finally, they spot their attackers and hear a shout from one of the main magicians, who reports that Jin Runkendel is alive and gives the order to protect him. A knight of the Black King's third mercenary clan confronts Jin and Nanny Gilly and promises to take them under his protection. At the request of their family, the fake knights of Runkendel continued to pretend to protect Jin and Nanny Gilly, but to everyone it was already clear that they weren't traitors, but were originally fake knights who didn't have the 7th rank. Because if that was true, it wouldn't have been difficult for them to deal with the mage squads and the Black King. Jin ordered Nanny Gilly to kill one of the 2 knights, then cut off the other's hands and bring them to him. Gilly did everything as Jin said, and he felt it necessary to indicate that every servant of the Runkendel clan must be a martial artist of at least the 7th rank, which of course the fake knights did not know. The knight who was kneeling in front of Jin and had no hands started to speak, shouting that the Runkendel clan would soon fall and the era of their rule was very close to its end. To which Jin replied with a smile that he would also strive for this, and the era of Jin Rukendel's rule would begin very soon. The knight was stunned by this statement, and shouted that the era of the Zapel clan's rule over the whole world would begin, to which Jin ordered to throw this knight somewhere nearby and leave him for dead. The Zapel clan had been Runkendel's sworn enemy for 1,000 years. The Runkendel were forced to make a humiliating pact with the Zapels after Temer's death, in which they swore an oath that Runkendel had no right to wield magic and that they would only become swordsmen instead of swordsmen. Jin realizes that he is facing a follower of the Zapel clan and assumes that the Zapel would not send such weak knights to such a task, which means that they are independent extremists who have nothing to do directly with the head of the Zapel, despite the fact that Zapel constantly terrorizes and sets up the Runkendel family in every possible way. Jin thanks him for his loyalty and makes an agreement with the head of the Black King's mercenaries and asks for protection up to the teleportation gate, who agrees and reflects on the boy's words. After all, Jin speaks with full confidence about a new era of government, where he will rule, whether he is too serious for such statements. The knight of the Black King's mercenaries orders the protection of Jin and Gilly and specifies that his subordinates behave appropriately and respectfully to the child of the Runkendel clan, from which it can be understood that the Black King's mercenaries do not like Runkendel, but willingly cooperate with them. But there is no choice, you need to follow the order. Jin and Nanny Gilly head to the nearest village, accompanied by the Black King's mercenaries, to wait out the storm. Nanny Gilly still feels guilty about Jin, because as a 7th rank martial artist, she should have identified the fake escorts. So on the way, she mentally prepares for a reprimand from Jin, or even worse, his parents. All Nanas of the Runkendel clan lead their lives together with their children, who are taken care of by Nanny Gilly is no exception. In a previous life, Nanny Gilly had a very bad time because the child was on her side. Care is the only one in the family who is not talented, incapable and worthless, but she did not show her suffering to Jin. She always smiled and did everything in her power to make him happy. She never blamed Jin for her suffering. And after Jin was banished by the Runkendel family, she only apologized to him for not being able to serve him properly. Gilly blamed herself for Jin growing up like this, even though it wasn't because of her at all. Jin didn't want Nanny Gilly to blame herself for all his troubles again and asked her not to blame herself for not being able to recognize the fake knight, which was followed by an apology from Nanny Gilly, and Jin promised himself that her life would not be like the past and she would become stronger. Nanny Gilly was encouraged by Jin's words that she was his only protection and that she needed to stop blaming herself, and promised herself that she would do everything possible to protect Jin. The group of escorts, Jin and Nanny Gilly, reached the village and proceeded to the hotel for the night. They shared 2 rooms, one for Nanny Gilly and one for Jean. Captain Murakeo, who was the current head of the Black King's mercenaries, promised to keep an eye on Jin and Gilly while they rested. As soon as he entered the lounge, Jin fell asleep thinking about the unknown Bouvard Gaston, who has the gift of reincarnating into any creature with an identity that is indistinguishable from the original. He committed a lot of crimes and immoral things, which is why he was hunted down. In Jin's previous life, Bouvard Gaston was caught and imprisoned when Jin was 20 years old, but in his current life, he is correspondingly free, and Jin hesitates to be companions with him, because the help of such a powerful being would be useful. Jin decides to observe the world around him and see if anything has changed compared to his previous life. In the morning, Jin wakes up to loud noises coming from the window, so loud that it's unbearable to sleep. He goes to the window and notices on the ledge of the window a black cat, which was the source of such terrible sound. Jin at first does not understand what the cat wants from the innocent window, but then remembers that it is none other than Murekin who promised to follow him and not be revealed. Jin doesn't understand why it was a cat, because it was possible to transform into a servant or at least a rider. Jin lets Murekin in through the window and starts asking him why he chose the cat. Murekin is clearly displeased the fact that he was not allowed into the heat for a long time, screams about his indignation, and in a fit of rage does not notice the board under his foot and stumbles over it, falling right into the windowsill, breaking into 2 pieces with his head. At the noise and loud noises, Nanny Gilly runs into the room and sees Murekin as a threat to Jin, opens knives from her sleeves and is ready to attack an attacker who, in her opinion, intends to harm Jin. Gilly jumped on Murekin, began to strangle him, and promised to find out all his intentions. Jin, referring to Gilly's nanny by name, unwittingly attracted Murekin's attention to Gilly and recognizes her as the strawberry pie wizard. Gilly, not understanding what he is talking about, loses the power of speech in her aggression towards Murekin, who is still unknown to her. Jin introduces Murekin to Nanny Gilly, and she apologizes for her behavior to the Runkendall family guardian. Nanny Gilly finds out about all the stories of Murekin's appearance in Jin's life. Gilly is slightly upset that Jin had his own secrets, but is very proud of her status as the nanny of the future head of the Runkendall clan. After all of Jin's story, Nanny Gilly decided to ask the source of the loud and sharp sound in Jin's room when she entered it. Murekin recounted the situation, and Gilly doubted his power and trustworthiness because Murekin seemed clumsy and rude, which means he's probably irresponsible. After meeting Nanny Gilly and Murekin reverts to the form of a cat, and they travel to the teleportation gate, accompanied by Murakayo and his squad. In front of the teleportation gate, Jin says goodbye to the Black King's mercenaries, thanks them for their protection, and promises that the Runkendall family will soon repay them for their work. Jin and Gilly pass through the teleportation gate, are identified as the Runkendall family, and are shown to the waiting room without being screened. They sat down on the sofa, and then Nanny Gilly asked if Jin understood that he needed to carefully hide his magic skills. So he convinced her that he knew what to do and no one would know about it. After some time of waiting for Jin and Nanny Gilly, they are joined in the room by the son of the Zapel clan, Veridin Zapel. He calls the Runkendall family scum and laughs at them in every possible way. Then Murekin, in the guise of a cat, comes up to him and attacks Veridin. The guards accompanying him were ready to draw swords and attack the cat and Jin with Nanny Gilly. But Veridin said that everything is fine, and because of the simple antics of the animal, you should not draw swords. Veridin didn't see any reaction from Jin to all of his actions or words, which interested him, and he approached Jin to apologize for what he said before. In the previous version in Jin's life, there was no contact between him and Veridin even when Jin joined the Zapel clan. Jin remembers him as a powerful magician who can claim in the future to be the head of Clan Zapel, a charming and noble magician with outstanding abilities that not every child of the Zapel family has. Jin was lucky to have met him at such an early age. After all, there wasn't even a hint of them meeting in his previous life. In response to Veridin's apology, Jin lets him know that he is pleased that he is not completely stupid for having ordered the guards not to draw their swords when he was attacked by a cat, because he could easily lose a pair of fingers in his guards. But almost immediately Jin realizes that Veridin doesn't realize the consequences of his actions. Veridin was very attracted to Jin's coolness and restraint, coupled with a good intellect and ability to negotiate. Veridin actually claims that if he lost his guards and a pair of fingers, Jin would give him a reason to start a war between the clans. To which Jin explained to him that no one would start a war because the children of 2 clans found a reason to quarrel. Veridin thanks him for his observations, agrees with him, and offers to repay the debt in return on the knowledge he received from Jin. Jin smilingly asks him to be quiet and not bother him until they are in the same room. Veridin was upset, because he would not mind talking to Jin again, and if not for the clan feud, he would like to stay friends with him. In frustration, Veridin silently sits back down on the sofa opposite. And now the teleportation begins. In a few seconds, Veridin and Jin will find themselves on different ends of the world. In these last seconds, Veridin decides to try his luck and asks Jin for another meeting, to which Jin does not reciprocate and disappears, finding himself in another place. Jin arrived safely at the Runkendall estate without incident and adventure. He and Nanny Gilly were met by the deputy head butler and escorted inside, where the whole family is already waiting for him. Gina was greeted by his mother Rose Runkendall, whom he hadn't seen in so long, and his father, who was clearly waiting for him to return. Everyone notices the cat on Jin's shoulder, and most of them are not happy with such tyranny from the younger Runkendall. When Jin explained that he had tamed it and given it a name by giving it the surname Runkendall, His brother Depues was taken aback, explaining that Jin had no right to give a surname to an unknown animal. The father asked Depues to be silent and asked Jin why he decided to give him the family name, to which Jin undoubtedly swore an oath to be responsible for this cat and take revenge on anyone who would harm him. All the siblings looked at Jin as a spoiled and arrogant child. Then the father and mother laughed and noticed that Jin had a talent for making enemies with his actions. But before he arrived, he had already given his siblings a reason to doubt his rationality. 4 years had passed since Jin had returned home, and 4 years had passed since he had started sword training and joined the cadets. At this point, he had the status of a rookie cadet, a second-rank martial arts skill. The daily routine included morning workouts and afternoon workouts with meal breaks. This was the routine of any cadet other than Jin, because sometimes his schedule included training with Sister Luna, where she taught him the skill Call of the Heart, which was an aura release and a wave strike on the enemy. The skill was learned by knights of the 7th rank and above, but Luna decided that teaching a second-rank Jin would be a good idea, so I spent every day training with him to learn this skill. Luna herself did not use aura to perform this skill. Jin had a lot of questions about Luna and her training, but decided to trust her and do what she says, and one day he will be able to find new abilities in himself, as Luna says. Luna herself always set goals for their training sessions, and Jin always exceeded her expectations, which she was undoubtedly happy about. She knew that Jin had a great future ahead of him, because he was completely different from ordinary cadets of his rank. His stance and skill were head and shoulders higher than the rest, so Luna was sure that it wouldn't be long before Jin could use the skill she was teaching him. In the cadet squads, guardian knights are trained, and Jin found a friend, Belob Schmitz, who was not distinguished by outstanding abilities and grades, but was pure in soul. They went to dinner together, and Jin often gave him his meat, which Belob was certainly happy about. In Jin's previous life, he recalled that Belob was expelled from the Runkendel clan cadet ranks and then joined the Karin family, another swordsman family, where he was trained in swordsmanship and began to follow all the orders given to him without his own opinion. Jin was surprised at Belob's fate because he became part of the Imperial Guard, but very soon the news came that Belob had died by suicide. Jin didn't want Belob to live such a life again, so he made the decision to help him stay in the Runkendel cadet ranks, because with his generosity, he shouldn't have to live a terrible life twice. Once is more than enough. On one of Jin's usual days, there were sparring sessions among the cadets that earned them the most points for a good final grade. The instructor told Jin that his mother had given him a condition that if he won 10 sparring matches in a row with the strongest cadets, he would be transferred from the reinforced group. The reinforced group was different from the usual one in that the fights were held with real swords instead of wooden ones and more intensive training with more training. Jin took this very seriously and waited for the moment when, after sparring among the cadets, the strongest ones would be selected to fight him. He knew that he had 8 consecutive wins, which meant that he needed to surpass himself and increase that number by 2. He wasn't worried about any of the upcoming sparring sessions other than the Milkano Mass. In his previous life, Jin remembered Mass first as one of the most successful cadets, and right after training, she became a guardian knight of the Runkendel clan. Sparring with Mesa wasn't about skill, but about endurance, so Jin decided to use tactical combat skills. When Masa struck, he deflected them and attacked with simple attacks, his main task being to hit the same point on Masa's sword. As expected, Masa's sword soon broke into 2 pieces and Jin was victorious. Masa was stunned that she didn't have enough tact to fight Jin and promised to defeat him next time. At the end of all sparring sessions, there are 10 minutes left before lunch and everyone starts to disperse. Jin asks the instructor if he can do another sparring session. He challenges Belob Schmitz to a duel. Everyone is perplexed, including Belob, but he can't refuse his friend who is also the youngest child of the Runkendel clan. So he goes out on the field and asks Jin why he is doing this and why he challenged him to a duel. Does he really want to show his superiority or bring it into shape? Jin attacks Belob without response and uses strong attacks, giving it his all. Jin's task was to make Belob angry so that he would show all his potential with anger, and Gina successfully comes out after a certain number of attacks. Jin knocks Belob down and he doesn't understand why Jin is so cruel to him, to which Jin tells him that it's not just sparring, because he challenged him to fight him, which means he can kill him. Jin gives Belob a chance to get off his feet. Everyone around them doesn't understand what's going on because an aura starts to appear around Belob, and he was the first cadet to use an aura. With a single blow, Belob shatters Jin's sword and he becomes unarmed. He has to hit Belob on the arm to stun him, and then start choking him. Jin lets go of Belob and he starts shouting that if this is a duel, then it was necessary to finish the job. Belob is crying because he was humiliated by Jin's bullying and doesn't understand what he did to deserve it. But Jin just apologized to him for all the cadets there for not taking him seriously. Belob studied the opponent's tactics at every match, but he was always a little weaker and lost. He was storing up the skills he had learned and learned how to use the aura, but it wasn't enough. Jin gave him this boost to display his power. Even though Belob lost, it's obvious that he has a huge potential. Jin ordered everyone who witnessed the incident to keep quiet. After that day, Night King reported everything that happened to Jin's father. Shiren realized that Jin's path is to dominate everyone, but help the weak, and then he decided to check whether this is the right path, and at the end of the holidays sends him on a mission to the southern border with the kingdom of Zhan, where the lands of the beastmen are located, and the marked territory is the domain of the White Wolf tribes. Together with Jin, 9 other cadets of the lower ranks were sent. Cadets with lower average grades were selected in the list, including Belob, and his grades are not so stable. The territory is clearly not suitable for junior cadets. Jin doesn't have a choice, so he starts preparing for the task. The mission was to find the heir to the kingdom of Jin from the Beal family, Sembra Beal. 4 days had passed since the beginning of the task. The cadets were divided into 3 groups, and every day one of them had to return to the camp and report on the situation. If a cadet is injured, he must remain in the camp until he returns to normal. On the 5th day, harmless watertail creatures were discovered in the beastmen's territory. Watertails avoid predators, which means that it is almost impossible to meet predators in their location, which indicates the safety of one of the groups. Jin sends Masa and 3 other cadets to scout Zone 13, while he goes to inspect the watertail area. Bai Jin and others were watching the watertails and planning their next plans. Belob ran up to the group and reported an attack on the second group and that they were ambushed. One of the cadets was able to run to the camp and report the attack. The group was attacked by ordinary people with unknown motives. Jin sends 2 cadets to the camp to explore the area around them, and he goes in search of the second group with Belob and Sierra. During their search, they found blood on the snow and nearby bandages and medical supplies given by the Runkendel clan, which means they are definitely bandages of the second group. They were attacked and wounded, and they went on the run, and when they thought that the enemy had lost them, they stopped to heal their wounds, but the enemy found them and they had to run again. Jin was furious and was about to take revenge on the one who interfered with Runkendel's affairs. Soon, following the trail of blood, they found the second group in the midst of a battle with the intruders, but there was no mass. Jin asked Belob to close his eyes for 2 seconds and then suddenly attack. Jin activated spiritual energy and attacked the enemies with destructive power, and then Belob jumped on top of them, thereby ambushing not the second group, but the enemy. Jin knocked down one of the surviving attackers and gave him the choice of either killing him and his family, or telling him what they were up to and where the mass was. The choice was obvious, and he says that he himself is a member of the Kinzella Revolutionary Group. This group called itself Revolutionary, but in reality, they not only wanted to kill the head of the Zhan Kingdom, but also put their own group leader in charge of the kingdom. Jin doesn't listen to the persuasions of his team, gives the order to go to the camp, and he went in search of the mass. Approaching the border of the Beastmen territory, Jin is attacked by another revolutionaries. Jin quickly dealt with ordinary swordsmen, but the magician began to attack him with fire and ice. But everything was even because Jin was immune to fire and protection against magic below the 5th rank. Near the place where he was attacked, he found traces of people and carts. He realized that he was somewhere near the camp, and in order to confuse the revolutionaries, he set fire to the forest. While already in the camp, Jin chooses the following options. The leader quietly kills him and takes the keys to the building where he initially failed to get in. Once inside, he notices the basement door, and when he opens it, he finds an exhausted mass. He helps her out of the basement and then out of the building. The street was quiet. All the revolutionaries stopped shouting. Only the sounds of fire remained, and Jin immediately understands that the camp was attacked by the beastmen of the Battle Wolf tribe. A quasi-Truca warrior from the White Wolf tribe appeared in front of Jin. As soon as Jin introduced himself and gave his last name, the wolf was filled with rage and hatred towards him. 1,000 years ago, the first head of the Runkendel family defeated the great White Wolf Javier in battle. The entire tribe considered him their god, and his death led to endless hatred for the Runkendel clan. Quasito, filled with hatred, gave Jin the choice of falling in battle or running away, an obvious choice for Jin, and the fight began. Jin repelled all the attacks of the Quasito, not daring to attack himself, because breaking through the wolf's skin is not so easy. He had little choice for survival. A few days ago, before the task, Jin had to choose a sword for himself to go to the advanced group, and Luna asked him to trust her in her choice. The next day, she presented him with her first 2-handed sword, which was clearly suitable for her, but not for Jin. Although Luna was upset, she had a second version of the sword for Jin and gave him the Bradamante. This sword is very similar to the Barasada that Jin chose in the selection ritual, and if this sword was chosen for himself by Jin, then with 100% probability it would cause quarrels and resentment among the sisters and brothers. But in Jin's case, Luna had presented the sword to him herself, which meant that there should be no objections from now on. After meeting Murakin in his room, he explained to Jin that this sword is intended for people who possess spiritual power, and the sword can be awakened, but with the third rank of controlling Jin's spiritual energy. This is forbidden to him, because it can lead to the fact that he will die in the flow of spiritual power, because he will not be able to get out of it. Sometime after talking to Muraken, he found Jin, who was trying to awaken the sword. Muraken was furious at Jin's impudence and again explained to Jin in more detail why he should not do it at a small rank, just like last time. That was why Jin couldn't use the sword to its full potential yet. In the fight with Quasaido, Jin began to sort out the options for repelling him. He could not use magic, because then the Knights of the Runkendel clan would come here and find the remnants of magic matter, which means that they would reveal the fact that he had violated the ban on magic possession. He could have broken the pendant given to him by Luna, but he felt that the enemy was too weak to spend such an important item on it. Then Jin only has one option left to attack. Using spiritual energy, Jin's sword turned black and Quasaido was shrouded in darkness. He didn't even notice how Jin cut his chest. Thus he was defeated, the wolf's life ended, but Jin didn't. Next, he had to deal with the terrible pain that was bursting inside him at the moment of awakening the sword. Muraken came to him in hallucinations and told him to wake up so as not to die in this hole from the flow of spiritual energy. Jin tries a mana burst, but it doesn't work, then tries again and then again. For the fourth time, Jin manages to get out of the stream and remains alive and unharmed. Jin gets up to pick up the mask to take to the camp and hears a sound. He spots the survivor, a kid with blonde hair. It turned out that the revolutionaries who equipped this camp took the heir of the kingdom of Jan hostage, which means that they completed the purpose of their task, found Simber Bill, and you can return. Jin asked how Kinzello managed to kidnap him, and then Simber told the whole story. 2 years ago, Simber's beloved died and he grieved for a long time about this. Recently, she appeared in front of him and offered to follow him, which he assumed was true. She didn't actually die, because she was exactly the same as when she was alive. And then he was captured by the Kinzellos, and his beloved was gone. Jin immediately realized that Simber had been kidnapped for money, and that his lover was actually Bubar, but he had no idea how and why Bubar had started working with Kinzel, and where he could benefit from it. Jin decides to personally meet with Bubar in the capital of the Kurano Duchy, in the workshop that he manages while Jin is a cadet, because the cadet is less suspicious than a high-ranking knight. Jin returned home to be greeted by Nanny Gilly and a visibly displeased Muraken. In an attempt to pet Muraken, he bit Jin and Jin threw him against the wall. Muraken was reincarnated as a human, and there was an argument between them that Jin should have used the pendant instead of awakening the sword, but Jin thought otherwise. Muraken found out about this due to Jin's abrupt transition from the third rank of spiritual energy mastery to the fourth. Jin said that he didn't want to experience this pain again, so he wouldn't do it again. Meanwhile, Jin's other two sisters were discussing the news that Jin had defeated the White Wolf. And Runkendel, the 9th captain of the Runkendel family, and my Runkendel, the 8th captain of the Runkendel family, had no idea how a third-rank cadet had defeated a White Wolf pack member of about the 6th rank. But most of all, they did not understand why their parents so easily believed in this story, because it is almost impossible and sounds like fiction. They suggest that it might not have been a wolf at all, but a man in a wolf's skin, or a very weak wolf not from the White Wolf tribe at all. Next to the sisters, the conversation was listened to by the brothers, who at first hid their fear of Jin, but still confessed that they were afraid of him, after Anne threatened to cut off their tongues for lying. Then the sisters decide to put cadets from the advanced group to protect them. The advanced group consists of knights from the 3rd rank to the 5th rank. There can be both young cadets and those who have not been able to move to the next group for decades. In such places, cruelty reigns and you need a company with which you will protect each other. When Anne singled out a few knights who haven't been able to move to the next group for a long time and made them their slaves. They gave one slave to the Tong brothers to defeat Jin, but if they don't succeed, then let them wait for the consequences. On one of the days before training, Jin was called by his mother, who had previously suggested through people that he move from his usual room to another where the future heirs of the family who will become the next head of the family usually live. Jin refused his mother's offer, and she decided to ask him personally why he refused. She started by complimenting him on his excellent performance in completing the task and his skill, but then moved on to the main question for her about the room. Jin explained his refusal by saying that the room is too big for him alone, and the refusal of the room is his final one, the solution. Rose lets Jin go to practice and falls into thoughts, because she can't fully understand whether greed is present in Jin at all or whether it overwhelms him to such an extent that it is not visible. The real reason why Jin gave up the room is that if he moves into the room of the eldest family, then he will be hit with a huge amount of negativity from his siblings. As it turned out, it wasn't kindness and confidence in his son on the part of his mother, but a test that Jin successfully passed by refusing the room. Jin already knows in advance from Sister Luna that they will try to rein him in and take control, so to avoid this in the advanced group, he wants to take control of everyone first. Before going to the General Assembly of Cadets, Jin gave a brief briefing to those who joined him in the advanced group with the successful completion of the task. Jin warned about the groups that are in the advanced group and asked not to pay attention to the antics, bullying, and dirty tricks from these groups and promised to take care of it himself. Jin will take revenge on himself for disrespecting his people in the advanced group. He spoke about precautions such as, do not go in groups of less than 3 people even outside of training time, because at any time they can attack and they will have to fight back. And if they are caught one by one, I can beat them to a pulp. And the elders are not up to children's fights, so no one but their accomplices it won't help. Opening of the new year of training. All cadets of the advanced group are gathered. He announced that 27 students had left the walls of Runkandle Manor, but 10 new recruits had joined. Jed asked the seniors to teach an advanced group of junior recruits the rules. Any quarrels among the trainees are not his concern until it comes to murder. Only the training of swordsmanship skills and their subsequent assessment concerns him. Jed made it clear with all his words that being in an advanced school was not a bad idea. A group can have violence in it that it doesn't care. And after his speech, Jed asked to remind students of the main rule of an advanced group. Everyone started shouting, Runkandle doesn't need weaklings. This may have raised the morale of the students already there, but it might have scared off the newcomers, because they were seen as potential weak opponents. Jin spots Tong's brothers among the crowd, and next to them is a cadet who clearly hasn't been able to advance to the next rank for a long time. Jin immediately realized that it was clearly the sisters who were trying to find the brothers someone who could help them get rid of Jin. Jin wonders why all these words were said, presumably to break the confidence of the newcomers. And then Jin stands up in front of the crowd, and specifically in front of the Tone brothers and their accomplice. With a completely cool look, Jin pulls out his sword and cuts off the right arm of the cadet standing next to him with a quick movement of his hand. All the students did not expect such a development of events and impudence on the first day of arrival of newcomers in the advanced group. In the deathly silence after a while, the cadet's cry of pain and the screams of the brothers were heard, who were clearly not happy with the fact that their assistant for elimination, Jin, was himself eliminated by Jin himself. In a fit of rage, one of the brothers blurts out that Jin cut off the hand of a cadet belonging to them. Then it becomes clear to everyone that this cadet belonged to their group. Jin asks the cadet's name and if he understands why Jin cut off his hand, but later answers that he saw the bloodlust in his eyes. Jed sees the whole situation as a battle for dominance that has always been and will always be in the Runkandle family. He is pleased that Jin's actions are not accidental, and instead of learning a lesson from his older brothers, he taught them a lesson himself and won this battle for dominance. But considering this act daring, Jin announces his name and makes it clear that at the slightest disobedience to him or aggression, he will ambush these people and maim them as happened today. Jed is fed up with Jin's impudence and decides to stop this mess by asking Jin why he decided that he was allowed to do everything in front of the elder. Jin replied with absolute boldness and confidence in his words that he had shown his strength not only to the Tong brothers, but also to the elder. Jed becomes enraged, not understanding what this kid who has just reached the 3rd rank is saying, and forces Jin to explain himself for his words and promises that depending on the answer, he will decide to chop off Jin's head or not.